Hello, welcome back to Conversations at the Well.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, happy Valentine's Day, but it's not going to come out on Valentine's Day.
I take that back. That didn't happen.
It is Valentine's Day. But hello and welcome back to Conversations at the Well. I'm Desireé Brown and this is my husband, Vernon Brown. Today, we're going to be talking about anchors. I think it's a much needed conversation. You're probably like, what is that? But if you stick around and listen, you will find out for sure. All right. We'll see you soon.
See you then.
All right. Hey, babe.
Hey. So today we're talking about anchors.
Anchors. So should I describe what that is?
Yeah, because I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. So anchors. I was thinking about this idea. I mean, it's been a lot going on. I think the headlines have people like feeling one way or another. Some people are overjoyed. Some people are like devastated. And there's just those things going on. But this is not unusual. This is something that just happens throughout life where there are these changes that sometimes are out of our control. Sometimes there's more things that are within our control. And so I wanted to talk about things that keep us anchored in the middle of constant movement and changes throughout life.
I see what you did there. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That makes more sense.
He didn't know what I was talking about before we started this. He was like, what are we talking about? I was like, anchors. He's like, okay.
When I think anchors, I think the things you screw into the drywall before you screw in something heavy, and it kind of works, but I wasn't thinking about feelings and stuff.
But you know what? Honestly, that could be a metaphor for
here we go.
for helping to balance when things feel heavy.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So, like, how do you like not fall out the wall when you're supposed to be holding up something that feels very strenuous and heavy and like I don't even know if I can do this. So, that is an anchor. But of course.
Gotcha.
Of course, like a more typical anchor, when we think about an anchor, is more from like a boating perspective.
Yeah, it holds it in the same spot.
It holds it in the same spot. Doesn't let
in an ocean that's always moving.
In an ocean that's always moving. Perhaps there's a storm going on. I don't know if you want to be anchored during a storm. I don't know. I'm not a boater. I don't know, but sounds like it might be something that you might consider if, especially if you're like docked somewhere, you want to be anchored so your boat's not floating away somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's just something that keeps you held in place when the circumstances around you are shifting, whether they are shifting in a slower manner where it's just like a nice gentle flow, if we're talking about water, or if it's something that is a bit more, like a torrential rain or storm or something, it still has, it helps you to stay in place when things are going.
But I think sometimes when we talk about anchors in this context, we automatically jump to the negative, that when things are going wrong, you need an anchor. But I think likewise, even when things are going really, really well, sometimes it helps to be anchored so that you don't get too full of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to open up the conversation and kind of talk about that because I mean, I don't know. I have been trying to stay. I haven't tried very well, but I've been trying to stay.
You've tried, but you haven't succeeded.
I have not succeeded in kind of staying away from the headlines. And a lot of changes are happening, as we all know, and it just feels unsettling if you allow it to. Now, then there's some coping mechanisms that we have, and maybe that's what we're talking about, the coping mechanisms that we have to be okay in the midst of a lot of shifts. So, you are a person who tends to not be emotionally rocked by much. And it is something that has both it's made me, I guess I have admired it, but I've also been very frustrated by it too.
What do you mean frustrated?
Like, do you not feel this? Like, so anyway, I thought perhaps there's something I can learn from you, and maybe I can share some of the things I try as well. And maybe our people listening, our viewers, our listeners will let us know what they do to kind of maintain when circumstances are shifting. And it doesn't have to be a negative thing, like you said. It could be like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I found like mass success and things are shifting. Or I don't know, like other good things. Maybe family dynamics have changed. Like maybe they have gone from being a single person to a married person, or maybe they have welcomed a new child into their family, or maybe it could be maybe it's just a new relationship and they're trying to make room in their life for someone else. So I'm curious about how you manage to, like, what are your anchors? Like, what keeps you grounded and focused so you're not so emotionally rocked by, headlines for sure, but I want to even think a little bit closer to home when there are shifts and changes in your personal life. How do you, like, keep it? At least your demeanor says you're not rocked by it, but you might be pedaling heavily underneath the water.
Well, I think there are things that you can control and things that you can't control, and I think there are a few different types of people, but like to break that statement down, I think there are people who can like really indulge and be fearful in what could happen. And then there are people who spend most of their time thinking about what is happening. And what I mean, when I say what is happening, I mean what is impacting them. And I think when we peel back the layer on headlines and changes and all the things that are circling around us, much of what we worry about hasn't actually happened yet. Like, it's things that may happen, it's things that possibly could happen, it's things that, you know, maybe people have told us could happen, but they haven't actually happened. So for me, a huge anchor is what's actually happening to me right now, and what can I do to affect it? Because if I can't do anything to affect it, what I'm worried about it for? Like, I can be upset, I can be angry, I can have all the feelings, all the emotions, like you were saying. But if there's nothing that I can do within my power to change, impact, or modify it, I can have the choice to either just feel that and be stressed out by that, or I'm going to say I can't really change it. So what do I do? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It's very logical. I guess I have a question around you have basically said I can choose. So you've boiled it down to, it is a choice. It is a choice to worry. It is a choice to be anxious. And perhaps that's true. But
even when I think about, like, when I lost my job for that long time, like, on one hand, man, I really need a job. On the other hand, all I could do is apply. So there's this huge cloud hanging over my life, and I'm applying, I'm doing everything that I can. I can continue to worry, or I can just find something else to actively do that will take my mind off of that. Because if I just sit here and wallow and worry, it's not going to do anybody any good.
So that's way more practical, because I was like, well, how do you make the choice? So it sounds like it's okay. Within my realm of control, this is what I can do. I can apply for jobs. I can, let people know I'm looking. I can, I don't know, update my LinkedIn pro. I don't know, whatever those things are. All of the things.
Get the little LinkedIn membership that you only get when you're looking for a job.
That pro job, pro account. Yeah, but like, so it was almost as if you were just redirecting your energy into things that you could do something about versus the things you could not.
Yeah. Because, I mean, otherwise, we're literally just worrying for no reason.
Yeah.
Because either it's no reason because it hasn't happened yet, or it hasn't impacted us really yet, or it's no reason because we can't do nothing about it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, you see those funny movies where, like, well, this is a horrible example, but I still say it. Like, you see those movies where, let's say a cartoon, where some bomb is about to go off in some amount of minutes. And they're just sitting here, well, I'll just kick up my feet and read the newspaper, because at some point you can't do anything about it. And like, you worrying or running or this, that, and the third, you're not going to get far enough away. You're not going to be able to change anything. So what can you control? Well, I mean, I guess I can go in the basement and hope for the best. But outside of that, what are we doing?
Yeah. I think that's very practical. And as a person who has dealt with like anxious thoughts, and especially, I think I'm better now. I won't say I'm fully cured of that, but I will say that I cope a lot better than I did a while ago. Like, it used to be not good.
Yeah.
And so I do think, like, even in therapy, you talk about like, what are you thinking about, what you're thinking about? So like, what are those thoughts that are going through your mind, and reframing the thoughts that you have that are coming your way? Because, and what I mean by reframing is like, if I take the situation with your job, your layoff, right? So, so it happened. You weren't even anticipating it happened. So it wasn't like, I'm so worried I'm going to lose my job. Da, 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 da. It was just like, oh crap, I just lost my job. Now I have to figure out like my next move.
Yeah.
So I guess they kind of almost saved you in a way, because it wasn't like a lead up to it. But for a person who is faced with that situation, okay, has lost their job, it could be maybe the first initial reaction is like, oh my gosh, this is so devastating. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Where's my meal? Where are the meals going to come from? How the bills going to get paid? I got to feed my family and all the other things. So that might be the initial reaction, but it's still like, okay, but okay, let's pause a second. So today, are we fed? Yes. All right, we got some clothes, we got a roof right now. Next thing is due, maybe it's due soon, maybe it's due in a week, maybe it's due in a few days, but we were already prepared to pay that one. Cool, so we're good. So we got a month to figure this out, essentially. And then from there, the reframing begins to start, like, what is in my control? Can I pay for my whatever for this month? Boom, got that covered. Okay, so next month we maybe we have savings, maybe we don't. If we don't have savings, we got to figure this thing out. What resources are available? Like, how can I?
One problem at a time.
Who do I talk to? Do I need to call my mortgage company? Do I need to call my landlord? Like, what can I do to be proactive and mitigating the potential risks that are there? And I think that's super practical. Are there other? Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I think the common thread through that is there's a choice. You can allow yourself to be overtaken by the thought, or you can be overtaken by the action. And so on one hand, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Yeah, those feelings and thoughts are there. Or I can say, all of that's a huge cloud, and I can't reach out and grab a cloud. Let me figure out what the real okay, this bill's coming up, that bill's coming up, that bill's coming up. And let's try to solve these one at a time. And so in one, you're just allowing yourself to just wallow in what you can't grasp. The other one, you're doing the same thing, but like you said, reapplying your focus to the problems at hand. Now, I think a better analogy, rather than talking about like, how do you recover from not expecting and then just losing your job, but what happens if it's like hanging over your head? Like, oh my gosh, this could happen. This possibly could happen. Oh my goodness. Well, this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Do you deserve to get fired? Like, when you look at your work, when you look at how you do your job, I think the first question should be, why am I here? And being very honest about, am I really adding value? And for some of us, that answer may be, no, I'm really not. I really didn't do a good job. I really am a mediocre employee. And I think you have to be able to be aware enough to say that, because that's going to judge what you do next. Well, with the time I have left, when they're putting their names on the chopping block, maybe I need to change my behavior. Maybe I need to show up on time. Maybe I need to actually log in and do my work. Maybe I need to do my job as I'm supposed to. One, because it may show that I care about my job to my leaders. But two, it may get you in a habit of actually working. So when you find your next role, you have the habits, you have the consistency, you have the ability to do your job as you should. And then from there, it's like we have to stop in the things in which we have a role in. We have to stop putting those responsibilities on everybody else. There are some people who just don't do their job well. They just average. And average means that when it comes time to cut back, you the first one on the chopping block after the people who are below average, but you're still on the chopping block. And I think too often we get upset, get in our feelings. Oh my gosh, this is happening to me. You put yourself here. And I think the more we can communicate that like that honestly and effectively, is the more we can have real conversations about how we move to the next place.
Okay. So let's talk about the people who are like, no, I've been doing everything. Like, I've been working my tail off. I've been showing up on time. Like, I am very reliable, all of those things. So how would you address those people?
So first of all, what percentage of those people are they?
Not, I don't think there's a high percentage, but what my point is,
I
just,
get it.
yeah.
But I think we put ourselves in that category way quicker than we should.
Yeah.
Because we think what we do is effective, but we've never asked those whose opinions matter if what we do is really effective. Just because you do the 5 tasks on your to-do list or you do the job as written doesn't make you an A student. Makes you average because you just did what was asked of you. So I think that's first, because I think there's a lot of people who think they do great work and great jobs, but they just do what's required, which literally by definition is average. That's what you've been asked to do. So we're talking about a super, 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 super small group of people that not only do what's required of them, but are doing what truly adds value to their company, organization, or to their manager to lighten their load. So if you find yourself in that 3% of people, then I think it's okay. This is happening. This has a possibility of happening. Is this a place I want to be? If you are truly that stellar of an employee, you have options. You don't have to be there because you're a great employee. You can draw clear lines between what you do and the impact that's happening because of it. So go find a job tomorrow. But I think what a lot of people will realize is doing what you think to be great, which is actually average, isn't really all that desirable in the eyes of other employers. Like it's rough and it's brutal and it sounds hurtful and it makes you kind of look at yourself differently. But I think when we really look at ourselves, sometimes we find that we may be in positions because of us more than anything. And let me anchor this by saying I don't want to say I'm a take ownership kind of person, but it's easier for me to accept something that is my fault than something that I had nothing to do with. So I'm always going to try to find my fault in a situation because I feel like I can't get better by saying it's somebody else's fault. Even if it's their fault, I still can't get better because of that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
No. I mean, yes and no. I have personal thoughts on that, which I don't know.
Well, I'm not talking about you. Do you agree with that being an assessment of how I choose to look at things?
Yes. I thought you were asking about your general thoughts on this, but I have more, or I think I just have a different approach to it. Like,
yeah,
yeah. Anywho,
like what I think we. And I don't think it does a good service because we're talking about jobs. But every manager during every cutting season has 1 or 2 people that are non-negotiable. I need them.
Yeah.
Like I can't do this without them.
Yeah.
And so that golden parachute always exists. But if that chopping block comes to you, you are not that golden parachute. So you can either say, oh my gosh, woe to me, this happened. Or you could say there were 2 parachutes of people who jumped off the plane before it crashed and I didn't get one of them. But even with the layoff with me, like there are people who still work at that company. I didn't get one of the parachutes. Why not? Well, I did my job well. I did my job well. But maybe my job as I was doing it well wasn't adding enough value for them to say, we can't let go of him.
Yeah.
Because there were people whose name probably came up. We can't let go of him because he does this or they do that.
Yeah.
Or this person is controls the books. Like
it makes sense. It makes sense. And it makes sense. I think it's something that most people don't think about because
it's uncomfortable because it points the finger back at you.
That part, yes, but also because I don't think most people are in a position of hiring and firing. I think that when you begin to be the person making the decisions, you begin to understand that a whole lot more and a whole lot differently. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, like if you're let's say you were responsible for hiring people, you have the opportunity to review all of the resumes that come in for that particular position. Mm-hmm. And you can see a clear difference in the applicants. Mm-hmm. You can see like, wow, these are stellar standout people. And then, okay, these other people are like, okay, they could probably do the job. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see the people's like, I don't even know why they applied for this because they just, no. Mm-hmm. So when you have that experience and that perspective, it really, it shows you something a little different, and it also makes you reflect a bit more on yourself and like how you as an individual would stand up to other people competing for the same position.
Yeah. And I mean, we started this talking about anchors in dealing with like uncertain times. And I don't necessarily think the way that I think is healthy either, or even better. Because I'm not going to say taking that level of accountability, but recognizing that level of accountability exists may not always be the best mental health way to live your life, because literally everything in some way comes back to being your fault. Like if you think like this, there's no getting around the fact that, hey, I had a role in it. Hey, it was my fault. Hey, your circumstances were bad, but you still failed. Like, so I'm not saying I recommend this way of thinking, because it's it makes you take ownership of a lot of things. And I'm not sure if people are really built to take that much ownership, or to just embrace the fact that it's not that important to me. That's why I'm here. So
I guess, okay, a question around that, because I do think that's
I feel like I'm on the couch.
Well, it sounds, it's a very American worldview, right? This is not something, I mean, in other places, in other countries, we don't have like performance and efficiency and all of that kind of stuff. These are very American concepts. Not to say that other places or other countries don't think about those things, but our society is largely based on like more, do more, perform better, do like all of those things, right? And so I guess I have the question around, what is my question? My question is around, okay, so you're like, I don't know if that's a recommended way of handling things, but like what would you recommend? Like, how does one still strive to do their best?
Well, let me
and add value.
Clarify what I just said. I would recommend it because I think it's I think it's effective, but I don't know that it's recommended for other people, if that makes sense. So I think it's the best way to think of things because it makes you take ownership. However, I can see someone like getting overwhelmed and feeling like they're a failure and ending their life because nothing is ever good enough.
So what is your anchor? Like, how do you not get to that dark place?
I choose my battles. I recognize I don't have enough time, energy, or desire to do all of these things. And so I decide that that's not going to be important in this season. I can give all the lip service I want, but I didn't do it. So I decided that it wasn't important. And by me recognizing that I made that decision, it's not, whoa, failure. It's, I chose something different. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So like
so any consequences that come from it, you're like, all right.
I decided. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't just, like usually, let's say there's some deliverable at work that didn't get done. I know it's supposed to be done. So when the person calls at the last minute saying, where is it? I'm not surprised because I know it was coming. Now, it's still not done because I chose for it not to get done. But I'm not going to sit here and lie and be like, oh my gosh, my boss is so crazy because you're calling for this, that. No, it was due. I knew it was due. Yeah. And I decided not to do it. Now, I may have indirectly decided by saying, oh, I'm going to get back to that. And I forgot. But that's not the boss's problem. That's my problem for my failure. So I take responsibility for that. And I recognize that I decided not to do it in that moment. I decided to leave it up to my memory, and I decided to therefore fail. But I'm not going to put it off on somebody else like it's your problem.
Yeah.
So I recommend that way of thinking because, as bad as the consequences may be, in the back of my mind, bro, you didn't do that. Like, yeah. I can lie and be like, I wanted to do it, or this, that, and the third, or come up with excuses, but I know in my heart of hearts that I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And I know in my heart of hearts that it came up, and Holy Spirit tried to remind me, and I busied myself with other things. So now the bill came due, and I got to deal with the consequences. But I'm not so fake that I'm going to come up and fabricate some sort of story to blame it on somebody else. I may tell somebody that, but as for me and what I know, nah, bruh, you messed up. And that's why you're here.
Yeah.
And so if worse comes to worse and you get fired because of it, you got to deal with that. And because I decided I'm not just around here wallowing in pity because of woe is me, I chose. This is the bed I chose. Not lay in it. But why is that funny?
It's funny because I know you, but the audience is getting to know you more. Oh, I don't know. This might be an interesting episode. Like, maybe people actually comment on this one.
So like real scenario. So my weight. I'm trying to lose. Well, I have had. So that's the truth, right?
Okay.
So I have had that on my list of things for a while.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I haven't lost any weight, or I haven't lost weight consistently. I can say, oh my gosh, I need Ozempic, or I need this, or I need whatever tool or quick fad that they need. No, I need to put the fork down and stop eating late at night. Like, I need to sit here in these classes and actually take them versus going over here and working on stuff. I need to prioritize that so I can live long enough to hang out with my kids. But if that's not happening, I can say, oh my gosh, and this, that, and the third, and all these other excuses. Or I can just say, nah, bro, you ain't do the work. And does that make you feel better when you are looking at yourself in pictures? No. But at the end of the day, when I see that and I feel that, I control that. I just have not decided to control it.
Yeah.
So within that failure, I still feel it, but I recognize it is because of a active and effective and purposeful decision that I make consistently. So there's no fingers to point but to you. So the question is not how do I crack this code or how do I do something different? The question is, when is it going to become important enough for you to do the work consistently over time? When is it going to be so important that you do that over and over and over and over and over again?
Okay. It makes sense. It's very, very logical, very practical. And then there's there's principles behind that. Like there's biblical principles, but there's also like just life principles. It makes a lot of sense. You're talking, and I was reminded of that. I guess it's a poem.
That's how you always say it, because you're country. Poem.
I say poem. Anyway, but excuses. You've heard that one. Excuses are the tools of the incompetent, which by monuments of nothingness, those who specialize in them seldom accomplish anything. Mm-hmm. So, interestingly enough, a lot of people, like if they've pledged a fraternity or sorority, they typically will learn that when they're online. But I learned it from, I think, my first, second, third grade teacher who probably learned it while they were online. But we would have to repeat that, and it's been there, but I think the reality of it becomes far clearer when you're an adult. Because as a child, you're like, that was Miss Washington. That was actually a little bit later. That was like in middle school. But boy, she drilled that thing into us. And but she was like, for real, like, stop giving me excuses. If you didn't do it, you didn't do it.
You chose not to do it.
It's not my fault. You didn't do it. You didn't do it.
You chose not to do it.
And if you didn't understand and you didn't ask a question, again, so excuses. And she would nail us with that every time we weren't performing as we were as the standard and expectation that she had, which was very high. As we did not live up to that, she would remind us.
And excuses given to others, are, I mean, I don't want to say they're horrible, but they're okay. Excuse given. If you must, do what you got to do, but don't lie to yourself. And that's my big thing. Like, I can feed whatever I want to anybody else, but I don't want to be so off that I don't know which way is up. Like, in all cases, I should know what the truth is about me. I could tell y'all and I could spin it to y'all and I can come up with a great story for everybody else. But at the end of the day, it's a dangerous and concerning place to be when you don't know your truth. Because then how can you fix it? Even if I want to fix something in the dark, if I don't know my truth, then I don't know where to put the hammer. I don't know where to saw. So the world, and I wish that we and what we portrayed to the world was always congruent, always parallel, always the same. But in the event that it's not for whatever reason, just guard that you know your truth. And because that's the only way that any kind of change is going to happen. Because you can't decide to say, okay, today's going to be the day I fix it. But now you've fallen so in love with what the fakeness who you are that you don't even know what parts of you are broken.
Interesting. I had a thought that I've lost as you were talking, but
Trying to say I talk too much?
No. It was just, I don't know. Anyway, we're going to move on because we're still talking about anchors, and it sounds like one anchor for you is truth.
Yeah.
Truth is an anchor, and it should be. I think that probably as a bigger anchor. So one of them is like, what's it within your control? Another one is truth. And both of those are tied together because what's within your control, and that should be true.
Now, I guess the question would be, how many truths are there? And I think there are multiple truths that we need to manage.
Okay, go ahead. You go ahead. Because I'm like, what?
I have my truth that I think is happening as I experience the world. But every person who comes into contact with me also has the truth through their lens. And I think too often we rely only on our truth for some people. And then too often we rely only upon the truth of those observers for other people. Whereas the real truth needs to be my truth in view of theirs and or their truth in view of mine. And so what I mean by that is I have a very unique way of looking at the world, as you can see by this, but I recognize that I'm in the minority of people who think this way. And so how I show up in the world, I may think I'm looking one way, but other people are experiencing me in a completely different manner. Now, just because I have belief and understanding of how I think, and I believe it to be right, does not necessarily mean that that's how everyone else experiences it. And so from a truth-based conversation, I need to both manage how I live my truth, but then also understand how that truth is experienced for others. So then I can make that same decision to say, do I want to impact others that way? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So let's say as a parent. Okay. So I need a scenario. I can't think of a scenario, but I'm curious. But from what I hear you saying, there's how you perceive yourself as a parent, your truth.
Yeah.
There's how your children perceive you as a parent.
So we need our boys to be disciplined. I need you to wake up. I need you to handle your business and get on with your day. I don't care what you got going on. Handle your business. Daddy, can you look at my invention? I don't care. Handle your business. Daddy, can we do that? I don't care. Have you handled your business? To me,
what does handle your business mean for the audience?
Oh, for our kids, that's wake up, make your bed, clean your room is what I'm adding. Brush your teeth, wash your face, all the things. Get dressed, all the things. Handle your business. Now, from my perspective, I'm teaching my children discipline. From their perspective, daddy doesn't care, or daddy doesn't want to see my invention, or daddy is always too busy, or daddy, doesn't have time. Now, there's a lot of legitimacy to what I'm trying to teach them by saying, I don't want to see your face until you handle your business. Because there's stuff that needs to get done, and you need to recognize that your morning routine is important, and nothing is as important for the most part than you setting up your morning routine and getting your stuff done and getting your day started on the right track. Because it will influence the rest of your day. It's super important. That's the lesson I'm trying to teach. But if they're interpreting that daddy doesn't care, daddy doesn't have time, daddy don't want to see me until I do this work, I need to work to earn my daddy's love.
Yeah.
Like I need to live out my truth with an understanding of how they're experiencing it, throw that all in the pot and see what comes out. The Bible says a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. So I may think I have this beautiful, perfect masterpiece, but I threw some dog crap on top of it and mixed it all up. Now the whole thing tastes like dog crap. So I missed the entire mission because I didn't recognize that there are views outside of mine. That doesn't mean I turn into some chocolatey clear backbone person and just say, oh, what do you want to see? And I tell you to go to bed and you want to show me something. Oh, let's sit down for the next 3 hours. No. But I just need to look at my truth through the lens of how others see it, take that into account. There'll be some times where it's like, okay, I need to modify a few things. There'll be other times, boy, get your butt in bed. But it's important that you recognize that multiple threads of truth exist. And with the same power that you choose to live your own truth, you have to choose that your truth is going to make other people feel a certain kind of way. Are you okay with that? Or do you need to modify? Does that make sense? Do you agree?
Yeah.
You don't agree.
It's funny because you are very you, and you're what? Are you not?
I want to hear what this butt coming at the end of it.
Well, I always think that it's interesting that we got placed together because I'm like, like I'm just not as, I don't have that. I desire to have that discipline, but I don't have that same. I don't carry it out in the same way, because you might be like, you the chocolate eclair over here. You're like, oh, let me see your invention. But I think that I think we kind of need one another, because if it was just a household where it was only, what was it, handle your business, then that can, I guess, create some of those unintended, they'll be very disciplined, but also have the unintended consequences of maybe not feeling that love. Whereas they're going to feel the love over here, but they can't just all the time feel that, because then there's no discipline.
Yeah.
And so I do think that is it's an interesting balance, just because we look at the life and just come into life in our days differently. But I learned from you, because I'm like, I need to also have my, handle my business mentality, because there are just some things that completely fall apart. We're talking about anchors, completely fall apart when you don't do it. So an anchor is like routine. Routine and Habits, which I guess are part of routine, right? Rituals, if you will, that help your day to go well. Because if you go to bed on time, that means you can wake up on time. If you wake up on time, that means you can do the things that help you with your mental health, or maybe your spiritual health, or just you can ease yourself into your day. You don't have to start the day, full throttle. Whereas if you wake up late, you're
running, ripping,
full throttle. Your patience is low. Come on, boy, get your stuff packed. Come on, get in the car. Why are your shoes not on? Like that whole situation, which I know a lot of parents can relate to.
Yeah.
But it just, when the day starts well, the day goes better. When the day does not start well, like the rest of the day just feels kind of not quite right. Feels like you're constantly trying to catch up. You might eventually catch up, but it just feels that way, definitely for the first few hours.
Which I think is a critical anchor. But I almost think that the word anchor oversimplifies it, because the anchor as a concept is one thing, but it's really made up of a bunch of smaller decisions.
Yeah.
So we just talked about anchoring your life with a morning routine. Well, first mini anchor, you probably need to get in bed at a regular hour. Like you said, you got to wake up at a decent hour. And you got to get out of bed at a decent hour.
Yeah.
And then it's like all of these different mini decisions that flow off of those things. I think when we think of it as, oh, I need a morning routine, it's very easy to fail that. But what's not easy to fail, or what's less easy to fail, is, did I wake up on time? Like, that's a win. And I think when we start to back into developing the life that we love, or the life that we want to live, as we break those things and those decisions down into smaller bite-sized chunks, you can start to recognize that even if you feel like your life is a failure, there are a lot of wins that happen. And for me, the more I take ownership and control of my life, the more I can recognize those wins. So for example, I want to have a very specific morning routine that probably is centered around waking up from 4:30 to 5, somewhere around there. Well, to say I'm going to wake up at 4:30 a.m. tomorrow, get up, exercise, do this, do that, it's probably a recipe for disaster. But if I can create the habit of waking up at that time, that's step one, and that's a win. And then step 2 down the road, maybe wake up and get out of bed.
by a certain time.
Yeah, by a certain time. Yeah. And or like even in this season right now, like I would say I'm with like 80% consistency, have been waking up at between 4:30 and 5. Now, we may spend time talking at that time, which is me deciding that, okay, I started this with the desire to get up and start my morning routine, but I'm now deciding to kind of steal those moments with my wife, which is kind of cool. So my plans have changed. It's no longer a failure. It's a success through the lens of, I'm now spending this time doing this, where I originally started out with doing something different. I decided though, and by me making that decision, I still put that anchor in my back pocket that I got up, that I was awake, that had some level of a coherent conversation. And then when the next season or the season that's appropriate comes, then I can say, okay, cool. Now let me go and start working on the rest of this routine. Yeah. But the habit I'm still working on.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that it's fun.
It makes sense.
Because it does make sense. It's a lot of, again, logic and practicality in what you're saying. So it does make sense. Mm-hmm. But I think many of us struggle with actually implementing those things. It's funny. We were talking about at work. It was like, we had a meeting. It was icebreaker was about books we're reading. Mm-hmm. And I'm still reading the Bible, although I have fallen off in my consistency. So I don't know if I'm going to meet my 6-month goal unless I do some serious, like focused work on that. But so there's that. But then one of my coworkers said that they're reading Atomic Habits, and it is. And she was talking about, I've picked it up and put it down, picked it up, put it down, and like just hasn't been able to finish it. I was like, I could send you the Cliff Notes. It's fine. It's like you do something that is going to like the cue, the thing that is going to start off your day to
and then create the chain.
Create the chain of action that says, all right, these things are going to get done because when I do this, I do. After I do this, I do this. After I do this, I do this. And it's just kind of a chain reaction to wins and successes. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because right before we got on, I was like literally looking up the summary of Atomic Habits. And it's related to this particular conversation because what we're describing is very much that book. And I'm like, oh, shoot, maybe I need to go back and read the book again or just pick up the at least the summary and remind myself of this is how this works. So like when I start falling off or when I'm like, no, I think I'm just going to sleep longer. It's like recognizing that's breaking the chain of the habits.
Yeah. And I think the topic of anchors and Atomic Habits, the book, which y'all should all read, everybody should read that book. It's a great book, are in alignment with each other. And I think it's undergirded or held up by the principle of taking ownership, recognizing there's feelings and emotions, and we might have to get to that in another episode, how to deal with those. But as it pertains to functioning in life and functioning in the wavy ocean that is life that's always moving, picking up an anchor, deciding what's going to start your atomic habit chain, whatever it is, and then start taking control of your life decision by decision.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to address, I do want to address the emotional pulling and pushing that a lot of us are experiencing right now. I'll say I'm experiencing. I don't know if you're experiencing it at all, but I will say that in and of itself is part of the chain, or perhaps the broken chain. Because what I have done, I know for me, because of the way news is reported, is so sensationalized and is designed to get people riled up. It's designed to make people emotional. I know that I cannot handle it in regular doses. I cannot handle news on like TV. I cannot do that. It's just too much for me. And so for that reason, I have cut that out of my life for the most part. If I can help it, I'm not watching the news. But I don't want to be living in a bubble where I don't know anything that's going on in the world. I tried that for a while. It was great. It felt good, but it was just like, you're so disconnected. You don't know what's going on. I didn't want to be that. So now I have the headlines that are delivered to my email. But the key for that to be successful is to only consume that after the other stuff is done, or to consume it in a manner of, all right, I'm giving myself dedicated time to read, to experience, to feel what I feel, but I got to get back to doing the rest of the work that has been outlined or laid out for me for the day. And because what I've realized, and I know you have something to say, but what I've realized is if I consume that before I get out of bed, I'm now like, ugh.
Yeah.
And I have added on to my day where I now have to do some mental and emotional work to get myself to be all right, to be able to do the rest of the day.
I think it all goes back to habit chains. And we only think about habit chains as it pertains to us being better parents, or us losing weight, or us accomplishing some task. But the way the brain works, everything is a habit, because the brain is trying, with so many pieces of information coming into our brain, the brain says, I need some way of summarizing it. Let me create a habit. I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. And I think when you recognize that life is a endless stream of habit chains, then you recognize that when you read that article, you feel the same way because you're kicking off that chain of events. And so what you talked about was, all right, well, I have so many things going on right now. Let me just throw that anchor or throw that habit chain over there. And I know I can't engage or start that program in my mind until after I'm done working, or after a certain time in the day, because then I can deal with it. Then I can go through that chain with less consequence. But I think when you recognize that your brain is just playing a program or running through a habit chain, when the time reveals itself, or when you have more free time, you can say, how do I break this chain? How do I look at this stuff in a different way? How do I respond differently so that I don't just play this mindless program? Rather, I think about it differently. And maybe you still draw the same conclusion, but the emotional response is different because, this may happen, but it hasn't changed my life at all yet. And when it does, then I'll deal with it. But until then, it's not affecting me. Let's keep on living. And maybe if that's your new program that you run, then you don't have to keep hiding that chain. You can change that chain to where it can still function inside of your life, to where you don't feel like you have to disconnect yourself completely, but you can just deal with it in a more positive or more fruitful way.
Yeah. I think for me, part of my a way I have not been anchored is, like I said, I've fallen off of my reading.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's super important that I'm reading the Bible in particular, because it helps me to see how like all of the bigness, if that's not even a word, but all the big feelings that I have, or how monumental these experiences have, or these headlines feel, in comparison to God, it's like, he can handle this like that. Mm-hmm. Or even if he chooses not to, that there's reasons for it. Like there's some growth that needs to happen, mm-hmm. or there's some, I don't know, there's just something, like I trust and believe God enough to know that he loves me and he's taking care of me, even when turmoil or things feel like turmoil. Like the word says all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And if I believe that I'm called to purpose and I know that I love God, then good, bad, ugly, and everything in between, there's some good coming out of it. Mm-hmm. And that helps me to remain hopeful. Like I rely heavily on my faith, especially right now when things just seem so out of control or out of my control. And so I lean heavily on faith to say, okay, all right, I don't get this, but God, I know you understand, and I know you see everything. You see the finish line. So just help me to be faithful, mm-hmm. and help me to be anchored in you. Let me help to focus on you and not get so distracted. Remember we talked about distractions. Mm-hmm. Help me not to get so distracted by all of these other things going on, because the fact remains is there's still a mission. There's a mission that God puts us on. There's a mission, at our job. We're supposed to do whatever the mission is for the job that we have. Mm-hmm. We may have a mission within our family and within our relationships. Like, what is the mission, and focus on the mission. Mm-hmm. And that helps to melt away some of the distractions and some of the just stuff that's going on in the world that actually has not impacted like personally, but it feels real close. Mm-hmm. So that's another anchor for me. Faith is an anchor for me. Mm-hmm. So
that you ain't been picking up,
that I have not been doing. And I recognize it. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you like, why do you realize this is important yet you still haven't done it? I'm still trying to figure that stuff out about mm-hmm. myself, but I recognize that it isn't an issue. I need to figure it out, but I recognize that it is an issue. Mm-hmm. So again, there's the truth, right? So we talked about a few anchors. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to summarize all of this stuff. So we've talked about like our own like accountability. Like what's the word that you would use to?
I thought you were going to say truth.
Well, there's truth, but you talked about something even before truth. Which was
awareness?
Yeah. Maybe it's awareness. So awareness. So let's start with truth. Truth. There's awareness. We've talked about habits or routines, rituals, whatever you want to call it.
Ritual sounds so weird.
It does sound weird, yeah. But we'll say habits. Mm-hmm. We'll say routines. Routines are made of habits. So we'll say routines. We have said, I feel like there was one other, and I know faith. So at least four that we've talked about. Truth, awareness, routines, and faith are anchors that we use to try to keep us okay.
Yes.
So I would love to hear from you all. Like, are there any things that we did not talk about that you do to try to keep yourself okay in the middle of changing circumstances, whether they're good or bad circumstances? Want to hear about that. And also any thoughts that you have on our thoughts. We are open to those as well.
Am I crazy, y'all? Because she tried to make me feel like I'm crazy. I don't think I'm crazy at all.
It's just a very different way of thinking. But I don't think it's a wrong way of thinking. I just think
it's the best way. Yeah, I agree.
I think that we just, for some reason, we've moved away. I think that's a older school thought. And it's kind of, here it is. You're kind of like Old Testament.
Wow. Okay.
Like there's rules and there's structure and there's consequences if you don't follow the rules and the structure. Mm-hmm. And then there's New Testament. It's more like, I get all that, but there's love and there's and there's compassion, but both of them tell this whole story. So it's not. I think there's a purpose for both.
I need to think about that. I don't know how I feel about being Old Testament.
Love and forgiveness. Do those words resonate with you?
No.
Meanwhile, I'm like, yes, love and forgiveness. Like, this is what it's structured, laws, commands.
Rain fire from heaven.
Right. Yeah, but it's like that's kind of how I see it. But the New Testament does not negate.
That why you made that wardrobe choice? You're covered in the blood over there as the New Testament.
It was really like Valentine's Day.
Oh,
so
okay. I didn't know how deep this went.
No, it doesn't. But I mean, if you're going to say that, maybe I'll tell other people if they ask it, because I'm covered by the blood. Covered by the blood. No, but I really think that. What is it? Even New Testament, Jesus says he didn't come to. Well, he came to fulfill the law. He said he didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And so it doesn't mean that the old way of doing things is wrong. It's just it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift.
In fact, some would say the Old Testament is closer to perfection.
Except for Jesus is perfection. So there's that.
We're closer to the garden.
But I'm so grateful. Thank God for Jesus. Because otherwise, like, we would be still like getting smoten. Smitten. No, not smitten. Smoted for everything that we have done that was wrong. But there's now opportunity for forgiveness and for to experience that side of God's love, because the other side is also love, because discipline is a way of love. Because if you don't discipline your children, right, that's what it says. If you don't discipline your children, like, how you're not loving them. You need to give them boundaries and structure so that they can be able to function as adults. And when you lack those things, they kind of fall apart as adults. We see this play out in real time.
Let me tell you, you're doing a horrible job of wrapping us up.
I am. Okay.
No, so funny. I was editing last week's or the last episode, and there's like a section where it's like we're closing, and it was like, oh wait, no, we're not. Anyways, go ahead.
I'm done. Thank you for joining us for Conversations at the Well. Please like, subscribe, share our podcast, and we would love to hear from you. So join us next time for Conversations at the Well.
We'll see you then.